voice teachers will tell you.
Now I
And
have an exercise when you take.
no, we'll talk a little bit about exercise. Well, we can talk about that now. The visuals exercise a lot, but the kinesthetics do work that is physical. And that's part of the reason they breathe the way they do. They do physical labor and they do breathe well. Now, if you were to take a piece of chalk on a chalkboard and draw the picture of a visual's lungs, they'd be almost upside down pear-shaped. And that's not healthy. It's not particularly healthy. It's not the best way to breathe. It looks best, and they stand there looking the best because they don't have a gut hanging out, so to speak. But they don't breathe the best, and their lungs are not shaped properly. The auditory's breathing is actually better, is actually the best, because they breathe with the whole lung, the entire lung.
Now, why would that make your gut hang out though? Because I know yoga instructors, and they teach you to breathe the deep breathing and
Well,
control.
that's because they do it right.
Oh, okay.
But most kinesthetics and auditories don't breathe
Okay, so
right.
that's the difference.
They may breathe low, but they don't always breathe right.
Okay.
And a voice teacher will go through that with anybody and explain to them exactly how to breathe and so that they get the full impact of their lungs. The visuals never get full impact of their lungs. They'll have this little dead spot at the bottom of their lungs where it's probably never been exercised, or it hasn't been for a long time, because they breathe so high. And that comes from the kinds of exercises they do. They'll do things that take a lot of wind, a lot of fast wind, and they don't have as much endurance as the kinesthetic might have because of the exercises they do. Okay. Breathing. Oh yeah, breathing. Breathing also is affected by their posture. Now a visual is almost always going to sit erect and stand erect. The visual's the one that's going to stand like they're in the army. They're going to stand erect and their chest will be out because that's where they're breathing, remember? And you'll never see their stomach move at all, but you'll see their chest move. And that's the way they'll stand. And when they sit, if they sit back in the chair, they'll sit erect in the chair, and they'll probably not move from this position the whole time you're talking to them. They might move a little bit, fidget a little bit, but not very much because they don't need to fidget. We'll talk about that too. But the auditory slumps just a little bit. When the auditory stands, they stand with their hips tilted forward just a little bit, which enables them to breathe just a little bit lower. Okay, and and they stand with their shoulders kind of curved in a little bit. I know in an auditory that his shoulders are it's like his shoulders are pointing. And when they sit, they'll sit like just a little bit more relaxed, maybe a little bit on one side. And the kinesthetic is the worst posture of all when they're sitting, but when they're standing, when you do the standing first, their standing is kind of rounded shoulders, and their hips are straight, but their breathing is real low. Okay, most kinesthetics. But when they sit, they have a real problem with sitting. Kinesthetics like to sit so that they're completely comfortable. They're the ones who will cross their legs, and they'll either sit with their legs crossed or slumped way down, like this.
You're at the movies.
You got it, at the movies. Or they'll be sitting like this. Okay. They will almost never sit erect. Almost never sit the way a visual will, because it's not comfortable for them. They want to protect their rear end. That's the most important part of their body. And so they'll sit so their rear end doesn't have a lot of pressure on it. Okay.
You don't think it could be a back problem?
It will be, but it doesn't start out that way. Okay? This will be a back problem, but it doesn't start out that way. It starts out for comfort. Okay? To relax, because that's what they like to do, is they like to be comfortable. They're the weirdest sitters. Okay? So whenever you see somebody sitting like that, then you know that's a kinesthetic. Okay? Posture. What's next? Oh, education. Because of their posture, the visuals usually get better education. They sit better, so they sit longer. If you've ever noticed, those students who do the best in school, they're the ones who have the best posture. the visuals sit the best, and the auditories also sit well, and so they both get pretty good educations most of the time. The kinesthetic then sits the worst, and so because they sit the worst, they can't get comfortable no matter what they do sitting in a classroom, and so their education suffers, and so they get a very poor education, which drives them to the next item, their occupation.
Welfare.
That's right. Or driving a truck, or selling shoes, or the kinds of things that a lower education requires them to do. Also, a kinesthetic will do things that involves them physically, like a sports personality. For instance, pro ball players are almost all kinesthetic because they're involved doing things with their whole body. They're not just seeing things or hearing things, but their whole body's involved in it. Okay, and these are the things that they gravitate to. They're truck drivers, like I said, and barbers, and they're the blue collar workers. They're the factory workers, those kinds of things. So kind of keep your eye out for their occupation. That gives you a clue as to what they are. Not an absolute, just a clue. Then the auditories, education prompted them into a better job, or projected them into a better job. And so because of that, excuse me, because of that, they turn out to be things like accountants, CPAs. Remember, they think well with numbers. They do real well with numbers. Engineers, musicians. The auditory, remember, hears sounds and logical information, so they have a lot to do with sounds. Those with perfect pitch, you know what perfect pitch is. When someone has perfect pitch, they will almost always be an auditory. There are only a couple of exceptions to that. And that would be if somebody had perfect pitch, was born with perfect pitch, and their parents either didn't know or wouldn't do something with it. Or they tried to get them to do it so badly that the kids rebelled and wouldn't do it. Those would be the exceptions. Barbara Streisand, for instance, is an auditory. That woman could sing like nobody could sing. Barry Manilow, whether you like their style or not, these people are auditories. Your own CPA, your banker, these guys are. I have a friend, a very good friend, who is a banker, works for Bank of America in Southern California, and we get along really well. But I'm sure a couple of years ago I wouldn't have gotten along with him at all because I didn't understand how auditories think. And every once in a while he'll even crack a joke, and that's pretty rare for most auditories. Now the visuals, occupations are things that have to do with the things that they either see or externally or internally. They'll either be models or actors or actresses. They'll be, a lot of them are salesmen, a lot of kinesthetics are salesmen, but most auditories are not salespeople. Okay. Visuals are, about 90% of the presidents of corporations in America are visuals. And I'll tell you why later. They are almost all visuals. Lee Iacocca.
That's exactly
is
who I came to my mind. I thought, is that true? And I thought, Iacocca. And then I read back through my mind quickly of his book that I had read,
That's
and
right.
I thought, that's a true statement.
That's true, he is. The guy that's president of Carl's Jr., what's his name? Visual. Victor Kiam, the Remington shaver guy, visual. So many of them that you could, former President Reagan, total visual. Okay, remember what we said about hair? Ronald Reagan dyed his hair, remember? Only a visual would dye their hair. An auditory would never dye their hair.
Then Barbara Bush is not a visual.
No, she's probably not. She's probably an auditory. I don't know enough about her to make a determination.
Well, she doesn't, right, does not dye her hair.
Yeah, no, but we know Ronald Reagan was visual. And his wife Nancy,
Oh, absolutely.
quite visual. Most actors and actresses aren't because they see things that other people don't. Off occupation, now onto the verbiage they use. People in the different patterns will use verbiage that is peculiar to their pattern. A visual will say things like, I see what you mean. or yeah, that looks good to me, or oh, I get the picture. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Okay, the auditory will say things like,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
No,
I hear what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
kidding.
Like, no,
just
I hear what
laughing.
you're saying,
I know.
or that sounds good to me, or
Yeah, everything to do with the ear.
it just doesn't click. Okay.
I don't think I heard what you said.
Yeah.
With that type of.
Yeah, 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 with their head like that, right. Okay, those are the auditory. The kinesthetics, on the other hand, will say things like, gosh, it has a real good feel to it, or it feels good to me, or gosh, I get the grasp of this, or that really gets me, because it gets it. Okay. So if you can pinpoint the kinds of things they're saying in a conversation, then you'll know how it looks or sounds or how it feels to them. Okay. The verbiage is real important to them. Okay. Beyond verb.
Can you turn that off just a second?
Sure.
Okay, just wanted to.
Okay. Okay, where were we? What did we just talk about? The verbiage? Oh,
We had not talked about it yet.
yeah, verbiage we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are the things that they say, like,
Oh,
that
okay,
sounds good to
okay,
me,
yes,
feels
we
good to me,
finished that.
looks good to me, those kinds of things. That's the verbiage they'll use.
All right.
And they'll use that all the time, and very seldom cross over. So that's a real good one. That one's an almost absolute. That's about as close to an absolute as anything on this list. Okay, but they will say things like, that sounds good to me, if everybody in their neighborhood says that sounds good to me, because they'll just pick it up. And so it's not an absolute, but it's pretty close. That one's a very good one. When they learn, they like to learn in different methods. The visual likes to learn by seeing things done. The visual, to give you a little demonstration of that, when I first learned to ski, I never took a lesson in my life, and I'm a very good skier. What I would do is, as I would ride up the lift, I would watch everybody else ski, and I would pattern my skiing or model my skiing after them. And I got to be a really good skier. In fact, I taught lots of people to ski, lots and lots of people, hundreds of people to ski, and they're all good skiers. In fact, my wife's sister, whom I taught to ski, is a ski instructor now, and she never took lessons in her life either, except for me. And so you can learn a great deal. Visuals can learn a great deal by looking at people. That's the way they prefer. Or if they can't see somebody do it, then they'll read about it. They'll read the instructions.
That's how I learned to water ski. I read a book.
You read a book, okay.
Really?
The auditory, they like to be told how to do things, or they like to read about it. If it's a technical book, they'll read about it. They'll read about it first before they'll be told. For instance, auditories are real good with computers, or computer experts are almost all auditories. They'd rather read the instructions, or those big thick manuals that come with computer software. They'll read through those doggone things. I mean, a visual work. It just soon have somebody show them how to work a program.
Well, most people don't know how to program their VCRs. They say 80%. So do only visuals buy those VCRs? I mean, that's what they say.
No, everybody buys those VCRs, but some people just don't know how to use them when they get home.
Well, I know they say about 80% of people don't know how to program a VCR properly.
Yeah, my wife.
I fall into that category.
Yeah, my wife can't do it.
I mean, to me, it's too time consuming to sit down and read the book when someone that already knows could say, look, hit that button, that button, that button. I'm just too busy.
Yeah, you're pretty visual. A kinesthetic would rather than, they don't want somebody to tell them how to do it. They hate that. They hate being shown how to do it. They just as soon get into it themselves. Okay, give me this computer and let me figure this out myself. And that's why they don't do well with computers, because computers take some training. And it's not easy to train yourself on a computer, or to play a musical instrument, or to do a lot of things. But it is easy to train yourself to play basketball, or football, or baseball. And that's why they do such a good job with those sports, because they can train themselves those things.
See, my object is to learn it as fast as I can, and if I can learn from someone else's experience,
Why not?
why not? They spent 6 hours to figure out how to do it. Maybe they could show me in a half an hour.
That's right, that's right. But kinesthetic won't do that though. Kinesthetic doesn't want to be bothered with somebody else in the way. A kinesthetic, for instance, is the kind of guy who on Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, while the kids are asleep, he's the Santa Claus putting together the bicycle, and he doesn't read the instructions, and he puts it together just fine. The auditory is the kind of guy who's sitting there reading the instructions, trying to figure out how to do it. And the visual,
Bought it put together.
bought it put together. That's right.
That's the best way to do it.
That's right. That's right. But the visual will sometimes not do that. I'll tell you, the real problem though is the auditory who gets it home, can't put it together, reads the instructions, still can't put it together, and reads the instructions again, and then finally gets it put together. Now, there's a problem with reading instructions for all three systems, and this is something that you should know, is that each person writes and reads in a different language. When you write something, if you're a visual, you write in your own language. A visual can read it. An auditory can't read it very well. It becomes cumbersome for them to read. And if you wrote a book that was in visual, and an auditory picked it up and tried to read it, they'd have a real tough time, and they'd say, this is a difficult book to understand, and they probably wouldn't even finish the book, because it's in a different language. It's like Greek to them. Well, kinesthetics and visuals and auditories are all the same way in that respect. And that's why visual will usually buy the bicycle put together, because the instructions are not written in visual. And they're not written in kinesthetic because the kinesthetics already know how to do it. They're probably written by some auditory office worker. And he said, well, first you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do this. And that's why the auditories don't mind reading the instructions, because they're written in their language. But on occasion, those instructions are written in a different pattern than auditory, and the auditory will get those instructions out of the box and try and put it together, read the instructions they can't understand. Because the factory worker this time, that office worker that wrote the instructions, might have been a kinesthetic or a visual. And they can't read them, and they can't understand it no matter what, and it just doesn't work. And as they would say, it just does not figure. Okay. And so they have to read the instructions several times before they finally get through it, because it's in a different language to them. Okay. That's real important. That's just a kind of a key factor to learning. Now, relaxing. Each pattern relaxes in a different manner. The visual loves to relax by going to the movies, reading a good book, maybe even watching TV, but just kind of relaxing. They may go to the symphony or the opera. The opera would probably be preferred over the symphony because there are words. But then they'll do things that they can relax their mind doing. The auditory, when they like to relax,
Tennis.
no. The auditory won't play too much tennis. The auditory, when they relax, they're going to be probably fishing, probably just sitting there doing nothing. The brain is stagnant; it's gone to sleep on it. And they don't care if they catch a fish all day. They're just there to relax. Okay, and relax they will. Please don't bother them. The kinesthetic is the one that's going to play tennis. The kinesthetic is the one that goes out and plays all kinds of sports. And they've had a tough day at the office, and they need to relax. They're going to go out and shoot some baskets with somebody. Or they're going to go play tennis, like you say. Or they're going to golf. Now, visuals golf, but visuals golf for a different reason. Visuals golf
For
because
a business context.
they look good golfing. Okay. The kinesthetic golfs to relax, maybe to take out his anger on that ball or his frustrations. Okay. Very few auditories will golf. Some will, but not many, because it's just not a. It's not
100. Okay, that's fine. I died. I did. There's a big hole right here. Let's just tell them my smiling.
Imagine if you fell and you went kaplunk. Ah!
Where's the song?
Elbow.
Everybody kick their leg out. Shall the flashes go off?
Everybody's like this, like you're looking for. It's the light. I see bodies coming. Hey guys.
Give me a J! Natalie and Shelly up here. We need a complete one.
They're not real social people. Remember, they deal better with numbers and sounds than they do with people. So if they go to a party, you'll probably find them off in the corner, or waiting for it to be over, or maybe they'll end up being the bartender and just sitting there listening to people having a good time, because they're not real participators.
Now, as you're describing these, I've taken one person that I know, and I keep jumping that particular person back from visual to audio.
Auditory.
Yes. And it's very peculiar because that particular person heads a corporation, but in a lot of cases, I don't see that he's visual, but he does participate in sports, but he can never look you in the eye. So, I mean, it's...
Well, we're not done yet, but,
right.
but some people favor two systems. And some people actually are totally integrated, and I'm a pretty integrated person.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife is too, and I'll tell you about that integration later. But that's the key, is to get all three senses, all three patterns running at the same time. Okay, and so we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. And if you can get two, that's better than one. If you can get all three, then that's better than.
But when you're trying to define
a person,
that would be difficult if a person's very integrated.
That's right, it is. And it's tough to, if you really knew, if you never saw me if you saw me every day of my life instead of just business,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't know what sense I was using, what pattern I used. Because I fall into all three of these very closely. I'm pretty well integrated. But I do the things that are visual in public, and I do the things in private that are kinesthetic.
You mean you go crazy when you get home?
I do. I wear my sweats. I work in the yard. I love to ride dirt bikes and all kinds of weird things. The visual would never be caught dead doing. See, so the integrated person is real tough. But we'll talk more about that in the sales situation when we get to that. Okay, and how you determine what to do. Okay. Parties. We talked about kinesthetic and parties. Kinesthetics like parties, but they like different kinds of parties than visuals. And the reason they like parties different, and what they like is, they like the kind of a casual atmosphere, backyard barbecue. Let's get together and play cards, or let's have beer and pizza. But they don't really like the formal ones because they're, stuffed shirt kind of people, and we don't want to be around that. That's what the kinesthetic thinks. Okay, and so they don't very often go to those. The kinesthetic, remember, is the one who doesn't dress up very often or doesn't like to. They're the ones who hate to go to formal weddings because they have to wear a tuxedo. I know a guy whose daughter got married, and he said, I don't know why I have to wear this stupid thing. And he didn't wear the cummerbund or the tie. At his own daughter's wedding.
No, I like to get dressed. I went to the inaugural ball and went to 5 black tie dinners,
And loved it.
I loved every bit of it. The furs, the jewelry,
And
everything.
an auditory would just say, well, it's no big deal. And a kinesthetic would say, I really hate it. So,
Oh, no, I loved it.
okay. Off parties, now on to humor. The humor of the visual probably is the best humorist. They tell good jokes. They're usually decent jokes. They're not real graphic. They're not real filthy. But they're sometimes are. And they're not real gross jokes. But the auditory can get a little bit more gross. But the auditory usually doesn't get most people's jokes. Because what they see is, they don't say, excuse me, what they hear you say is they hear you explaining the joke, and it's not funny to them, because what happens is, at the end, they probably figured out the punchline before you even said it. And it wasn't funny because I figured it out. But they do tell some jokes, and they are, when they do get a joke, they'll tell it forever. It's the same joke for the rest of their life. Okay. The kinesthetic is a pretty good joke teller too, but they have a problem with jokes. They get a little graphic and they get a little gross, and these are the ones that are a little bit dirtier. And when they tell jokes, the visual, stand up for this, the visual will stand up, and he or she may tell this joke or this story, and they'll be telling you the story or the joke, and then they'll laugh at the end, just a little laugh. The kinesthetic will tell you the whole story, and they're all into it. Their whole body's into the joke, and in fact, I'll tell you the story. This is the way the visual tells this story. There is this old man, and he's a golfer, and he loves to golf. And he goes to the doctor, and he says, "I have a problem, doc. I can't see where I hit the ball. My eyes are going bad." And the doc says, "Yeah, that's true," and he examines him, and he says, "You have a real problem. I can't correct your eyes, but I do have this other patient that can go with you. And he can golf with you, and he can tell you where the ball goes." Now that's the first half of the joke. Now I'm going to finish the last half of the joke the way the kinesthetic would tell it. Okay. Now the visual, you remember, talked a little bit like this, little hand movement, but not too much. Okay. The auditory is not going to tell this joke because he thinks it's just plain stupid. Okay, and you may think it's stupid too
I
because
probably
most
won't.
people do.
I like
This is a
jokes.
stupid joke, but I just use this one as a demonstration.
We're gonna get into
Okay.
the
Yeah,
sway of
right.
things.
What happens is the kinesthetic says, okay, and these two old guys, okay, right, he's got his arms going.
gesticulation.
These two
yeah.
guys are out there on the golf course, and they get up on the first green, and they tee off, okay, and the first guy gets up there, the first old man, and he's up there, and he gets on that ball, and he whacks that sucker, and it's sailing. You see the difference between the way the visual and the kinesthetic tells you?
Mhm.
Okay, and then he turns to his friend, and he says, "Well, Elmer, where'd it go?" And his friend says, "I forgot."
It is a dumb joke.
But you see the difference between the two, the way
Sure.
the jokes are told.
But don't you think sometimes it depends on what group you're telling it to? I'm a little more reserved at some parties. And
Sure, it
then
does.
when you're in a relaxed atmosphere, then I
Sure, it
might
does.
get a little more.
But it doesn't
into
matter
it.
where the kinesthetic is. He's going to be all over the place anyway.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He doesn't get reserved. He doesn't know how. Because he doesn't see what the visual sees. He doesn't see that these
It
are
might be
times that
inappropriate.
are inappropriate. Right. Yeah, he doesn't see that. He doesn't understand. Okay. The same as that father that I told you about that didn't wear the cummerbund or the tie to his wife's excuse me, wedding. They just don't see that it's inappropriate.
I know, I had a
Don't
friend, we had 300 people at a party. And it's all either Western or Indian with a big band, the whole thing. We had one fellow that, as a matter of fact, he's the fellow that owns Body Glove. He would not wear an outfit. He wore a name tag around it and he wrote Indian across it. And he still wore his cut-off shorts.
Yeah.
He said-
He's just going to wear what he wants. He's a kinesthetic.
That's right. If he's casual, he doesn't care.
Okay. Parties, humor, music. They all listen to different kinds of music. This is important too. The visual likes to listen to music with words. Operas, love songs sometimes, but almost any kind of song with words. They love songs with words. Auditories hate words. They don't see pictures, so why should they have words in their songs? They love instrumentals and they love symphonies. The kinesthetic, on the other hand, loves the songs with feeling. They love to be able to feel something. They like to be able to cry or to laugh at a song or to just feel real good deep down inside. That's the kinesthetic. The kinesthetic's going to be the one that listens to cowboy music. Okay.
But see, I like the first two.
Sure. You can like symphonies. I like symphonies. A lot of people like symphonies, but that doesn't mean that they're
I mean,
auditories.
No, I like instrumentals, and I like some with beautiful words.
Okay.
So,
What that,
Either way.
it's like I said, these are
but
generalities.
if I could
and
only
if you
have
use,
one, I would take without the words. I mean, if you had to have a choice the rest of your life, I would just take fine, semi-classical or, beautiful instrumentals. If I had to,
like fresh air.
yes, it's nice.
Yeah. Sounds good, doesn't
I see what you're saying.
it? Okay, you're getting the drift here. Okay, okay, anyway, they like, the Kinesthetics like that, yeah, they like that cowboy music and they like love songs, okay? They love to be able to hear, you picked Fine Times of Leaving Lucille, those kinds of things, crying cowboy songs. They love the feeling of the song.
Mhm.
Now, one thing you should know about the way they all listen to music is, remember the auditory doesn't like words particularly, the visual love words. If it's a pure visual person, you can probably pick him out because you're driving down the freeway.
And he's
And
singing.
he's singing, and there's nobody
that.
else in the car.
I do that all the time.
And you do it,
Yeah,
see?
sure.
Yeah, but the words don't mean anything particularly. I mean, they might, but nothing, I mean, it's not gonna break your heart if an ad comes on. But I mean, you'll stop singing and then the next song comes on, might be a whole different subject when you
Right.
sing it too.
Sure.
Because
I like-
it's,
it's
because you
fun.
like the words, it's fun, yeah, yeah. But the kinesthetic won't do too much of that. And the visual will stop if somebody sees it.
Oh, well, I will.
Because they don't wanna look bad, remember?
Well, I mean, it's hard to be singing when you're at a red light with somebody in the next car.
Some clown looking at you.
Right.
Okay, okay, that's music, okay. The way they deal with stress, each one is a little different. The visual deals with stress by exploding. The visual, if they're totally visual, they're gonna explode, they're gonna yell at you, they're gonna get it out of their system, and it's gonna be over.
Yes, I've trained myself how to do that.
But that was something that came natural to you. See, that's a visual tendency. The auditory will hold it all in, and they won't get mad, and they may say a few words like, that's disgusting, or, I don't like that, or, you know, that's wrong, that shouldn't be done. But they won't tell you how they really feel about it. When the kinesthetic, they're gonna tell you how they really feel about it, and they might hold a grudge forever.
I might fall into all three of those categories,
Okay.
depending on the situation. But my first, I would say probably my first tendency, and this isn't business, in my personal life would probably be, just depends on how far I've been pushed, but I would say to explode, get it over with, and forget about it.
I did that in an office situation one time. I had a salesman who lost me about $10,000 in commissions. And I brought him in, I yelled at him severely, I jumped right in his face. I mean, I was all over, it was like he was the enemy and I was in charge. I was the broker, but I had no business doing what I did.
I know, you
And-
always feel
And then when it was
terrible
over,
when
and
it's
then when it was over, I felt bad and it was donut day anyway, so I went out and I said,
makes me sick
it's-
when I do that.
it's time to go get donuts and let's go get donuts. And he said, you know, you're really weird. He said, you'll yell at me and make me think you hate me forever, and then it's all over. And I said, yeah, it is, it's over. And I'm sorry I yelled at you, but please don't ever do that again. Let's go get donuts. And he just looked at me like, you are so weird. Okay. That's the differences in the way they react to it.
But you see, I don't, if that's a tendency, I have found that I don't feel good to react in a visual way.